Here we go, Unit 2, Part 2. In this lesson, we're going to learn about the structure and organization of information and how to use advanced techniques when searching. So you're not just typing words into a search box. You know all the skills that librarians have to use those advanced techniques, or at least some of them. We're not going to give away all of our secrets. Okay, so let's think about for a second why it's necessary to organize information. So now, every day, I suppose, more and more information is available to you. And if it's not organized in any rational fashion, then it's going to be literally impossible to find. So if you can't find information, the information may as well not exist. So that's why the organization of information is so important, especially now that information is becoming exponentially larger and more available to everyone. So think about some ways information is organized, places that you know. So a bookstore or a video store. If you go into Blockbuster, they may organize by title, but also underneath different genres. So they'll have the new releases, they'll have horror, they'll have drama, they'll have comedy. So that's kind of, you can think of how they kind of organize within a broader system of organization. And then you can also think within a newspaper or magazine. So they have kind of different ways of organizing. If you think of a newspaper, not the NewYorkTimes.com or USAToday.com where you'd go online, but if you think of a paper actual paper newspaper, then you really get a good sense of how they organize things. They organize by topic. So the Metro section, the sports section, the living section, and that's how they decide what goes where. And you know when you pick up the sports section that if there's going to be a story about the Saints or about LSU's football team, it's going to be in that section because that's where sports belongs, so we all know that. So you can really kind of see how content often drives how things are organized, but format is also another way to organize it. If you go to a bookstore, you know that they have not just books, they have magazines, they have DVDs, they have CDs, and they're not going to just clump all those together and put them by title, so that they're going to separate them out by format as well. So these are all kinds of different ways that information is organized, and trust me, there are lots of people out there trying to decide the best ways to organize information at all times. Alright, so here are some terms we want to think of when we're thinking about the organization of information. The silliest word of all time, metadata. Metadata means data about data. And so let that one sink in for a second, and I'll explain exactly what that is on the next slide. A field is a type of metadata within a record, and a record is an entry in a database for an item made up of various fields of metadata. I swear this will make more sense in a few more slides. Just hold on. And then a database is a collection of records with searchable fields for retrieving information. So if you think of these four terms as kind of a Russian doll, one fits within the other. The metadata fits within the field fits within the record, and the records are in the database. Okay, so what do I mean when I say metadata? Metadata is data about data, okay? But what does that mean? So think about when you reply to an email. When you reply to an email, you get the message itself. So if your friend Susie sends you an email and says, hey, do you want to go to the movies? You get the, hey, do you want to go to the movies? But you also get other things. You get Susie's email address. You get the time that she sent the email, the date that she sent the email. You get all this other information, and all that information is the metadata. It's the information that helps you understand her message. So if you can't remember exactly what day she sent the email on, it's right there for you. It's the metadata that helps you understand the data itself. Okay, so a little bit of a closer look at the terms. This is a catalog record. So this is if you were searching in the library catalog here and you were searching for a chemistry book and you found this one, this is what you would see when you brought this up, when you clicked on this. So this is what you'd find, and this is a record. So when we're doing that Russian doll thing, the catalog is the database. This screen is the record for the book, and then we have fields, and the fields here are title, author, publisher. So those are the fields. So if we say we want to search the title field, then we're going to be using the words within the title to search for that field. Okay, you may want to rewind and go back and take a look at this one more time. Now, I'm not going to try to make you memorize every little thing, the differences between fields and records, but you really need to kind of have an understanding of this in order to understand how databases work and understand how to search them. So if that still seems a little bit cloudy and you're not really getting it, go back and watch it again and see if it makes a little more sense. Think about the Russian dolls, think about how the metadata of the title and author and publisher fits within the fields, fits within the record that is the book itself, and then the database that is the catalog. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about controlled vocabulary. So whenever you look up a record for a book or a journal article in a database, you're almost always going to be given some controlled vocabulary terms. And what controlled vocabulary is when someone actually looks at a record, a book, or an article and says, okay, this is what this is about. And so a telephone directory is a good example of controlled vocabulary. If you look in the Yellow Pages and you go to the back and you say, okay, I need to find a doctor, you know that you need to look under P for a physician, because that's how people have, or someone has organized those Yellow Pages to say, okay, all doctors go under P for physician, and so you go to physician. And so that means that someone else has taken control, I guess you could say, and made it so that you can find every single physician in the area. You just have to know that you go to physician. So controlled vocabulary is also known as subjects, subject headings, descriptors, concepts, or classifications. So here is another record from the library catalog. So this is for a book that's called Uncanny Bodies, The Coming of Sound Film and the Origins of the Horror Genre. So here, the controlled vocabulary terms are listed as subject terms. And if you look at the bottom, you'll see the first one says Horror Films, United States, History and Criticism. So that's one of the subject terms that's given for this book. So what that means is that someone looked at this book and said, okay, this book is about horror films in the United States and the history and criticism of those horror films. So what this means is that if you know that this catalog uses the subject term horror films, if you type in the words horror films, you'll be able to get everything that's about horror films. You won't have to look up scary films or ghost movies or some other term for horror films. You know that the term is horror films. Okay, so now we're going to talk about Boolean operators. And using Boolean operators really will mean the difference between getting good results from databases and getting not so good results. So if you can use these, you're really well on your way to being able to get through those databases and get the information that you need. Okay, so what do we mean when we say Boolean operators? Well, Boolean operators is a fancy word for three terms. The terms are and, or, and not. and you use those to connect words in a search and tell the database what you want it to do. Okay, so I'm going to go through those three and make that a little more clear right now. When we think of computers, we always think of computers as being really, really smart, but in reality they're not. They'll only do exactly what we tell them to do. And especially databases, you have to be very specific when you tell them what you want them to do. So if you use Boolean operators, then it's like talking to the database in its own language. It understands Boolean operators, and so it can give you exactly what you want. So if you wanted to look for books about both cats and dogs, you could type in the term cats and dogs into a search, and you know that what you get is going to be the middle of those two circles, the middle of the Venn diagram. You're not going to get anything about just cats. You're not going to get anything about just dogs. It's only things about cats and dogs. Okay, so what if you decided that you didn't care? You wanted things about just cats, you want things about just dogs, and you want things about both of them. You can use the OR Boolean operator for this. So if you are looking for a topic, this especially works really well if you're looking for something about children. There are so many terms for children, so children, infants, toddlers, adolescents, juveniles, tons and tons of terms. So if you want to link those all together and make sure that you're finding all kinds of things about people under the age of 18, then you can link those together with the word or. And so this is an example of that. Cats or dogs. It retrieves everything. Things about cats, things about dogs, things about cats and dogs. It's all inclusive. And then not is a little bit of a tricky one. So if you're looking for cats, not dogs, that means that you only want things that are exclusively about cats. You don't want anything that's about cats and dogs, so it's taking away that little area. Now, this concept, this Boolean concept, is really important to get, and so you'll find some information on it in the Bad Key book, and you'll find information on it in the online reading that I've given you right before this this podcast. So make sure that you understand this, and if you don't, of course, please ask. But make sure you understand this concept and how to use these before you complete the discussion board at the end of this lesson. So there's one more way to use Boolean operators, and that's with nesting. And the nesting is just a term for using parentheses to separate search terms, and it works like in math. And I'm probably scaring you by saying math, but, well, I'm scaring myself. But remember in order of operations how when you put parentheses around something, it told you to do that first. And that's kind of the same way that nesting works with Boolean operators. So an example would be children or adolescents and language development. So what I'm telling the database to do here is, hey, look in these parentheses, find children or adolescents. So it goes in, it looks for the terms children, the terms adolescent, and finds all of them, and then searches that with language development, and so takes out everything that's not about language development. So that's a way to use those parentheses with the Boolean operator so that you can make it work better and use longer search terms.